I'm here with screenwriter, playwright, Alan Fox. How you doing today?
What's up, man? I'm good. How are
Yeah,
you?
thank you. Let's start at the beginning. You've written some really incredible screenplays and then plays, but you're from North Carolina, right?
North
What was it
Carolina,
like
yeah.
growing up in North Carolina?
Um, I don't know, man. It's the only place I grew up. It was no, it was good. People every time I tell people I'm from North Carolina, they're always like, "Man, that's a beautiful state." And I think probably growing up, I took that for granted because it is a very beautiful
For
state.
sure.
But I never, I don't know. I didn't think about it that way growing up. But I grew up in the middle of the state, so it was like we were 3 hours from the mountains, 3 hours from the beach. We didn't really go to either one. I grew up playing basketball most of my life, so I was always in gyms. But
Yeah,
yeah, man, it was good.
I saw that you were all state in basketball. That's a
Oh,
pretty incredible accomplishment. And
yeah, thank you, man.
yeah,
Yeah, my big name drop is we beat Steph Curry in his last high school game ever.
that's
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah, for the state championship. So that's what I always do. But then I always say he got the last laugh, obviously.
Right.
So he went on
Yeah.
to go become the greatest basketball player ever. And I just, went and played at the Y. So he won.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. I love Steph Curry. He's changed the game of basketball, man. But you actually competed against Steph Curry. What was that like?
Yeah, man. I mean, I played against him like a lot. Like we kind of, I don't want to say we grew up playing together, but we grew up playing sort of around each other in AAU and stuff. And then we both went to private high schools in North Carolina.
Right.
He went to a high school called Charlotte Christian, I believe, and I went to a place called Greensboro Day. And so we were always sort of aware peripherally of each other, because like you are just growing up, you see the same faces, you play against the same people, you get to know people. And then yeah, man. So our senior years, we were the two top teams in the state in that division, and so we ended up beating them twice that year. And then the last time was in the state championship game. I mean, he was a great player then, and then he grew 4 inches. Like when he was in
Right.
high school, he was much smaller, and he was a good player, but no one thought he was going to go on to be the greatest player to ever play.
Right. Yeah. I don't think anybody predicted, that he would change the game of basketball, be mentioned, with the greats. And I think that's really an incredible trajectory. And, you being all state, obviously you're going to have offers. I think you went to college in North Carolina. You went to the University
Yeah.
of North Carolina. What
So,
happened?
so I went to UNC Greensboro my first year. I was going to play basketball. I actually tore my groin my junior year in high school, pretty bad. I was running track, and then kind of over the summer, I just sort of rested it, and I never really got. I probably maybe should have got surgery then, but I didn't. It's kind of every doctor had a different kind of, I don't know, diagnosis about what they thought it was. Like when I think, I mean, it's been a long time ago. But when I think back, no one really knew what was going on, so they was just rest, 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 rest. I didn't play AAU that summer. So a lot of the attention I had from college just kind of started to dry up because that's the big summer that
Right.
you got to play, Then I went to my senior year and I used to get maybe I got 2 cortisone shots. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they would
Yeah.
stick this big needle in my groin and be like, "Here you go play." So I don't know, it was a weird experience too. But anyways, man, yeah. So I played my senior year. My groin was hurt, but I still had a pretty good year. We won the state championship. It was. I thought everything would be okay, and I ended up getting a chance to go play at UNC Greensboro. And then, so I rested that summer again. I started playing in the fall at UNC Greensboro, which is actually in Davidson's conference, which is where Steph Curry went, obviously. So we were sort of tracking each other again. But and then in preseason workouts, I tore my groin again pretty good. And then it was listen, you should probably get something done about it. So I had surgery that first year. And after that, I tell people I kind of became a degenerate and stopped going to school. So at least for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were just partying, I guess, or just hanging out.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
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 And eventually though, you end up transferring though to college in New York. How does that come about?
Yeah. So then what happened is so I stopped playing basketball. Then by the next year, I'd kind of found myself in the fashion business. So I started a photographer had come up to me and I started doing the modeling thing a little bit. And that had led me, to Miami at first. And I came out here a little bit. And then I went to New York and was kind of doing that. And then I started going back to school when I was up there at a place called Hunter College.
Definitely. That's interesting. Like, I was looking at your IMDb and like, you do have like, some projects like, I saw like one of your earlier projects, it was like modeling caterers or
Yeah, that was something a buddy of mine made, actually. But yeah, but that was kind of a real thing, like in that world. Like
yeah,
there was a whole like ecosystem in New York
for
of
sure.
that kind of stuff that goes on. And so I was like, working with those kinds of places as well. And it's sort of just interesting, that whole sort of like subculture, that is.
So would you say like modeling was like the introduction to like the work that you do now? Like, how did that lead to you
Yeah.
actually being interested in theater and then like, pursuing,
Yeah.
writing a play like, that
Yeah, man. So I have like the weirdest journey because I went from like, I was playing basketball at UNC Greensboro, so I was going to play there. I got hurt. A year or two later, I found myself like, doing the modeling thing. I'm in Miami. Like the next year, I go to New York. When I was in New York, a photographer and a person that became a friend of my family's, he knew an entertainment attorney.
Okay.
And so the entertainment attorney helped me get some money from a modeling agency after I'd left because they owed me some money.
Yeah.
Around that same time, I was also doing some music stuff. And a buddy of mine, we ended up signing a record deal together that first year I was living in New York, which I know is like another sub tangent we can get into. But when I did that, the attorney who I was introduced to looked at the deal and was like, this isn't a great record deal, right? This is around the time, I don't know if you're familiar with like 360 deals.
Yeah, for sure.
That a lot of these
That
like the labels start to do, right? And after like 50 Cent made $100 gajillion with Vitamin Water, they were like, yo, we want our piece too. So you sign these deals where basically they get a percentage of everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And this attorney was basically like, don't sign anything when I first showed it to him. But I don't know, man, I was excited and I was in Atlanta and it was, I was at Outkast recording studio. And so I was like, man, I'm signing this. This is my dream, right?
Yeah.
It ended up not being so great. And so then for like the next year and a half, maybe 2 years, I was sort of stuck in this situation where I had to quit kind of doing the fashion stuff. I'd done some acting stuff. Like I'd been in a Taylor Swift music video. Like I'd maybe not before, but I was in a Julianne Moore movie. Like I'd done a little bit of stuff, but I had to basically stop all of that because I was in this record deal where they were getting money from everything I did.
Oh, so even like the acting stuff, like
so that's kind of like what a 360 deal is.
Yeah.
So basically like when you do these things, they will get a percentage of everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't making,
so even like your merch, even your touring, like I knew like you did, like the merch and the touring and then like, wow, that's
everything. Yeah. And it was like a management deal as well. So they had like their hands in everything. And, I wasn't making any real money then, but this attorney was like, look, you have to stop doing all of this until this situation is settled. So for basically like 18 months, 2 years, I couldn't do anything. I didn't really do anything. And it was really hard on me because I had like all this momentum. It's like I'd had this experience with, basketball where it kind of felt like, okay, I'm doing my thing. And then like the table was flipped over and almost like I didn't handle it that well. And I kind of had to like start again. So I moved on to something else. I was in the fashion world. I was doing the music thing. I get right to the like I get right to my goal. I signed this deal and then it was like the table was flipped over. It's like, you can't do it. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't do it again.
Yeah.
And the attorney who was representing me, I'm getting to your answer to your question. The attorney that was representing me represented a lot of writers and directors in Hollywood and a lot of playwrights. And basically he started encouraging me because I couldn't do this other stuff I'd been doing. I started trying to write. And the first thing I started doing is I think the first thing I really tried to write was like, I wrote this manuscript for a novel about my time in the fashion industry. And so he just basically encouraged me and became someone who was like, would read his name was Mark Glick. He's since passed away, but he would read everything I would write. He would encourage me. He would like, introduce me to people who could help me and stuff. And he was just really a very influential person in my life. So that's kind of what led me into writing. And then I had written that book and I'd also started doing this one-person show around New York. It was called Expectations. And it was me playing like 6 or 7 different characters. And I was incorporating, different themes from my life into these different characters. And I would play each one of them. And so I'd done that. And Mark and the director and stuff, like they had like helped get me a few days at this theater called the Cherry Lane Theater in New York. So I was doing like little showcases here and there. Then I had this run of Expectations in New York, this show. And there, an agent saw me and said, hey, I'd like to possibly help you as an actor. And I told him, I don't really know if I want to be an actor, but I think I like writing. And he was like, well, if you write anything, let me know. that's when I wrote my first play, which was Safe Space, which kind of got me my professional start.
Yeah, and that's a really ingenious play. Like, I was I haven't read the actual play, but I looked at the reviews and then just the synopsis of it. And I feel like it's very timely, especially like, like everything that's going on in the news, like with Charlie Kirk and, like TPUSA and like what it stands for. And can you talk a little bit about just what the play is about?
Yeah, man. So it was a play, and actually it was, I wrote it like 7-8 years ago. It was a long, I wrote it a while ago now. But it was basically about this college campus. It could be, I think it was called Allman College in the play.
Right.
And it's based in,
Fictional.
they say it, at the beginning of the places in any town, USA. And that was to try to establish that this could happen anywhere, right? And basically it's these three characters. And there's a 60-year-old Jewish female president of this university. There's like a 35-year-old African-American professor. And then there's like a 19-year-old Japanese-American female student. And basically, I don't know if you've seen the posters for After the Hunt, that movie that like takes place on a college campus now that's coming out. Safe Space was a little bit like that, where basically the premise of the play is this student accuses the professor of assigning a racist assignment. He assigns this assignment to the class that's basically write a paper from the perspective of one of the white founding fathers, justifying their decision to ratify the Constitution with slavery in it. And, coming from an African-American professor, this is sort of, this student thinks that's a weird assignment. Why would you do that? And, he has his reasons. He says, I'm trying to teach people how to think critically and understand and all this kind of stuff. But basically it sets off this like firestorm. And so like that leads to the whole kind of, the university sort of going into chaos over the play. And it's like a lot about ideas and like subjective truth and like what is a victim and who gets to decide what we learn or what we teach. And, this professor was someone who like looked at himself as sort of a very deep thinker, a very critical thinker, someone that like uses his logic and his education as a way to navigate through the world. And suddenly he was being challenged by this young student for like trigger words and stuff, you know what I mean? And like triggering his students. And that was, obviously it's a hot topic today. 7 or 8 years ago, there weren't as many people talking about it. And so it was interesting, I think, for a lot of people to read it and they're like, whoa, what's happening here? And it's sort of, now it's become such a, something everyone seems to talk about. But
yeah, like I was reading, I was like, oh, that's really like an ingenious play I did. And I read plays. I wasn't like one of those people who was like really interested in plays, like till I went to acting school. And then like, like it was like, oh, read these plays. So I started like reading. I think the very first play I read was like 6 Degrees of Separation.
Yeah.
And then I read like, some James Baldwin, like the one play he wrote, like Corner.
Yeah.
Writing this play, like, talk about like, like how long did it take from like start to finish before it was a completed work? And like, how do you make it believable? Because like, obviously this is like, a story that is coming like, from your imagination. Obviously you have some experience, like, going to college and, just the idea, but making it real.
Yeah. Honestly, man, like, and that was what I would tell people is like, because obviously like I wasn't, there wasn't like a white male character in it, right? So I'm like sort of like trying to get into other people's heads in some way, right? And I also didn't go to sort of a private campus-oriented college. Hunter's just in the middle of New York City. It looks like 4 random buildings. So I really just had to like do as much research as I could. Like I remember reading a lot of articles about Yale and because there was some stuff happening on Yale's. I mean, there's always stuff like this happening on college campuses, but there was a lot of stuff like happening at Yale at the time. And I remember reading about that. And I remember like trying to talk to some students and trying to reach out to different people and just kind of like put my finger on the most important thing about the research to me was finding the way that people talked. Because I think like what the ideas in the play, I think could have taken place anywhere, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like, because I think like, I don't know, this is one thing, man, that I'm curious how you see it. Like I believe that the writer's job is to do their best to tell like the most truthful story possible. Right. And by that, I don't necessarily mean like the facts are true. I mean like the undercurrent, the emotion is true. Like, you know what I mean? Like I can believe anyone would say or do anything if that emotion is there, if I understand why they're doing it. And so for me, like the biggest thing with this was like finding the way that students were talking about these types of like, trigger warnings and stuff like there was a lot of language like that before. A lot of, now there's like a lot more people, sort of like woke type language like that we hear about and talk about now. It's like that kind of stuff there weren't as many people talking about that.
Yeah.
So I had to like really get in and understand like how were students talking about it at the time. And then also learn from, you know, there was a professor that I reached out to that someone connected me to that taught at one of these schools. And he helped me kind of understand like how he might handle this. And then once, because the play was ultimately taken on by a woman named Amy Pascal, who's a big Hollywood producer, because they were going to turn it into a movie. And when she got involved, I also got introduced to like people that worked at some private universities. And I asked them like, okay, well, how would the dean handle this? Like, how would that work at the school, right? So a long-winded way of saying, I think like doing the most research you can, but then like understanding that like what's most important is like the truth and energy underneath it.
Right, right. No, I agree with that. I think, you know, just like realness and like, you know, just like being real and authentic, you know, that's the most important thing. Like, you know, I think
Totally.
like that I always like gravitate to people who are like, you know, trying to do like authentic work.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's like, it's real. Like, I think that a lot of times like people get caught up like sometimes in like superficial aspects of things.
Yeah.
But it is like, it goes back to realness and like, you know, how it resonates like with people. Like you want to do things that I think that affect people like, you know, some way emotionally. How was it received? Like, you know, when the play was done, like, you know, when you finally like got it up?
Yeah, it was interesting, man. I mean, one thing I'll say, you know, you mentioned James Baldwin, right? And his book, Giovanni's Room, is like a stunningly beautiful book. You know what I mean? And I think it's about, is it about two white guys maybe? I think the love interest is white. Anyways, whatever. I say that just to say though that like, I was bringing that up because a writer like James Baldwin does such like ferociously authentic work that like you don't even question necessarily like the research or like can he write it or whatever. It's like you just feel it in his words.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so when I say like when the undercurrent is truthful, which I think is what you're saying about responding to like authentic work, you can feel it when the emotion is truthful. It almost doesn't matter the color of the characters or whatever they're coming from or like their birth dates or whatever these superficial details, like you were saying. It's like when you capture that truth, I always say like the truth pings differently, the truth sounds differently, and you can just hear it with a writer like James Baldwin. It's just like truthful. Anyways, that was a bit of a tangent, but when it was, sorry, I love it. when it went up, man, it was the best of times and worst of times. I say that to say that like it was fine. Like it was, you know, but it was also a tremendous learning experience for me as like a first time playwright, you know, and there were a lot of like really big expectations on it, you know, like the guy that directed it's a multiple Tony winning director, like the produce, you know, there was literally the woman that produces all the Spider-Man movies was a producer, you know, she was the champion of it and it had a big theater, but like there was just a lot of like not to, you know, I told you I did that one person show called Expectations. There was a lot of expectations around it and I had very high expectations for it, you know, and I wasn't, as I look back on it, I wasn't confident enough and I wasn't skilled enough yet as a writer to get it where it needed to be. I didn't know how to navigate the rehearsal process. So like this would, you know, I'm curious about you, like as someone in acting and writing, like one thing I learned as a playwright when you get in a rehearsal room is everyone's going to have a lot of opinions, you know, and you got to know how to like navigate that and stand up for what you think is authentic, getting back to that, you know, like we talked about. And so it was a big learning experience for me. So it was like received fine, not as well as I'd hoped, but more than that, I learned so much about where I needed to get to if I ever got back to a place like that in order to have something I could really be proud of and be received well.
No, I totally get that. Like, you know, being new to playwriting and going through the experience, I imagine like that's overwhelming because
it was for me. And I think like even, you know, again, just because it's hard to talk about safe space without talking about this element, you know, when I wrote the play, I didn't think a lot about the fact that like I'm a white guy and there weren't white guys in the play, right? So then we got in the rehearsal room and there would be a lot of discussion about different stuff. And I wanted everybody to like me. You know what I mean? So at times, and you know, actors, I have so much in the past, right? I've dated a handful of actresses. Like I say that to say that like I've been friends with actors and actresses. Like I haven't always been as supportive of how difficult being an actor and an actress. I mean, right? As an actor, like,
for sure,
man, it's hard. And you got to put yourself out there and you got to really lay it out there. And it's like really hard to do, right? So I have such compassion. And I say that to say that when we were rehearsing Safe Space, you see sometimes how when actors and actors, if you get a little worried or you get a little scared, you start to like get defensive. You start to push back. You start to, you know what I mean? Everyone's just doing the best they can to make something great, but you're in such a tough spot. And I wanted to be liked as the writer. And I never wanted anyone to feel like I was not trying to be authentic by them because I'm just a white guy. You know what I mean? It's like I wanted them to feel heard. But sometimes I think I lost sight of what the piece was trying to do because I was trying to make the individual feel secure.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I now realize that like a lot of their insecurity was about the performance, not about the words, if that makes sense, you know? And not that, and they would get there, but it's just, and I'm sure you've been through that, right? Where it's like, you get up there, man, and it's like, you start, I do this all the time, man. It's like when things don't go well, I start blaming stuff that's not the problem. You know what I mean? I do it all the time.
I think that's just a natural human thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and I feel though, like, as a writer, as an actor, sometimes it's really just working on it. It's like you want to do the best job that you can.
Yeah.
And so like, it's like even just like taking direction, like, sometimes and stuff like it could be just a very, sometimes it's simple, but sometimes depending on like, the work that you're doing, it could be like a little bit more challenging, like to get there. And I think like some people have a better way of like talking to actors, like if you've worked with directors who've like worked with a great deal of actors or they've been an actor, they're probably going to have a different way of expressing things. Whereas like somebody who's like a first time director, I really don't know like what you want or, like how to deliver, like, and I think like, that is something that comes over time. But like, that's incredible. Like though the success, was that the first play you wrote or?
Yes, that was the first, so I'd done the one person play. But that was the first one with multiple characters that I had written. And honestly, man, like I look back on it. I love what you said about like, some people are going to, cause even when I'm talking about this, I find like I fall into this, I don't know if you feel this way. I fall into this trap of, when I feel insecure about what I'm saying, I try to over explain.
Yeah.
So I'll like do all this talking and all these hand gestures. And I get to the end and I'm like, dude, just say it in 7 words. What are you saying? It's like, and I imagine if I were directing someone, I might be the same way. But I say that to say it was the first one with multiple characters. And I think that in hindsight, what got people excited were the ideas in the play. I didn't understand the structure. I didn't understand structure in storytelling well enough at the time to write a great play. It was a decent play with great ideas. Yeah. And that's something that like in hindsight now too, I look at and I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. Like now I see how I could have done things differently to make it a much more fulfilling story, not just ideas,
That's great though. Like I think though, the importance of like going through the experience, because it's like that's not something you would know unless you go through it.
Unfortunately,
like,
I wish I'd have known.
Like even like I wrote a play.
Yeah,
I never like put it up or anything, but like I wrote it and like just the experience of writing it though.
Yeah.
I learned, like even like I'm not. No one really read it. Like it was for when I was in graduate school and we had to write a play. So like I wrote it and like I was like, oh, like I see good things about it, but like I don't know if like necessarily I would put my money behind putting this up. Like or
well, but even I mean, you say that, man, but even if it's just a couple friends sitting around a table, it's interesting because one thing I really learned too is like hearing your words are such a great teacher. It's a painful teacher. You know what I mean?
Right,
it's like,
right, for sure.
If you're hooping, if you're playing basketball and you got to watch game tape and they're like, you see, you're not playing any defense. I sat in a lot of team meetings where someone was pointing at the TV like, Alan, you're standing straight up and down. Why aren't you playing defense? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how it feels kind of hearing your work read out loud the first couple of times. Cause you're like, oh, like, you'll have some speeches on paper where you'll be like, I'm Aaron Sorkin. I'm cooking with gas. And then you hear someone read it out loud and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. But so even if it's like that of like that, putting it up is such a big step and commitment, but even just hearing it taught me so much, you know? And then you're right. Going through the process with the actors and actresses was such a learning tool of understanding, like I was saying earlier, man, like everyone's doing the best they can. How do you, I'm sure like as a writer, right? If you've got notes back, the first thing I do when I get notes is get defensive. I start going like, they don't know what they're talking about. Or that's it. And then I sit with it for a night, and I wake up the next day and I'm like, yeah, they probably know what they were talking about, And I think like going through rehearsal with actors and actresses, I learned about that side for them, which I just hadn't experienced in the same way.
Yeah, like I take reviews very to heart. Like,
Can't do that.
more so like, like with music, it would really affect me because it's like, I've never like had like any of the work I've written like reviewed, but like, like my music, I put out my music and like it would get reviewed. And then like sometimes I'd be like, wow, like, it's just like from a different perspective and something like people, because of their experience, they may take something and stuff that you may not even have intended and take a whole different idea than what you intended. Like, coming from music, like, did you kind of like feel the same way with that, like with, as far as like rejection or?
Yeah, man. I mean, music was a strange thing that like, I started doing it in high school, and I was, coming through and I was like selling CDs. Like, I used to do that. I used to like get hired to perform at frats in North Carolina and stuff. So like, I was like kind of that thing, like there was a time where like Asher Roth was like rapping,
I love College.
Yeah. And so like I was like a little younger than him, but I was like coming through at that time. But it's interesting, man, because like I look back and I wanted to be like Lupe Fiasco, but I looked like I was in a boy band. So like it didn't make any sense. It's like what's this guy? What's he talking? Like you can see, we just talked about Safe Space, right? It's like that feels like a very kind of like a guy, trying to be like a sort of intellectual type play.
Yeah.
It's like that's how I wanted a lot of my music to feel too when I was doing it. And then what was weird is and it was interesting, man, because I actually like felt more validated doing that type of music, right? And when I would get pushback, I remember thinking like, I don't know, I just felt so me and authentic that I didn't like I remember one time, I don't know, I guess this is a form of it. When we used to go around and sell my CDs in high school, me and my friends would like burn all these CDs and we would take them to people's houses, and because they would be like, oh, we want to buy some. And so we take them to their houses. And I'll never forget one time, we went to this one house and there were like a couple of guys and a couple of girls like out in this driveway, and they were like, drinking beer or whatever. And we came up with the new CD or whatever. And we like handed them out. It's like $5, $5, $5. And the one dude was like, nah, I'll just burn it. It's not worth buying. And that did hurt a little bit. I remember that to this day. But I've never had like, I mean, I know when I got a little bit older and I had some music release like a little bit to more people, that did start to affect me. But it's funny because by that point, I'd started trying to be like Rap Efron. You know what I mean? I started trying to be like this like pseudo hip hop kind of thing that was also kind of poppy, and like, I looked a certain way and I did a certain thing, and like that didn't feel like me. So when I heard people judge it, it felt much less personal, if that makes sense.
No, I get that. Yeah.
Like, with your music, you feel like it comes from you though. It's coming from the heart.
Right. Like
and that's hard.
Especially like I feel like anything like in entertainment though, like you're putting yourself out there, like, totally. And then like sometimes people like, that you will put a lot of work. I see like people just tearing people apart sometimes and not realizing like how hard they've worked on something, or like, like, and I like, I think like that's one of the bad things about social media is that a lot of people have like opinions, but like, necessarily their opinions aren't necessarily informed, and people are going to like what they like, but then not necessarily seeing like, oh, like, this person just spent a year like working on this album, and then people are just like, I'm not feeling it, or like, for no.
Man, I love this quote. I always think about this quote. It's Theodore Roosevelt, I believe. And it's like this long quote. I won't even paraphrase, but it's like the man in the arena quote. And basically what he says.
Oh yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah. Basically what he's talking about, man, is the person that should be valued, like live or die, is the one in the arena fighting, right? Yeah. And I think we live in such a commentary culture world now, whether it's online, even like the shows we watch on TV, who would have thought 20 years ago that there would be reality shows with podcast commenting on the reality shows, on like, you know what I mean? There's like 3 different levels of entertainment about watching people be silly on television. And I think it's because like, I don't know, there was a joke. You ever watch that show, Kimmy Schmidt?
No, I have no idea.
Yeah, it was he said, no, I never heard of that. No, it was on Netflix, and I think it was on Kimmy Schmidt. They made a joke about how like everyone nowadays sounds like sarcastic, like Chandler on Friends. You know what I mean? It's like suddenly the whole internet became Chandler.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, really true. And like we live in this very sort of like using sarcasm as a defense mechanism where everyone has an opinion and everyone kind of can tear people down and have a hot take. And like whether you're on TV getting paid millions of dollars to have a hot take or you're just by yourself in your room on the internet having a hot take, it's like we live in hot take world. Yeah. And I think that's dangerous for people that want to create stuff because it's like, well, wait a minute, like I don't know where to find earnestness, you know? Like I feel that way sometimes too.
Yeah, no, like I feel like that social media is very negative sometimes. And like I like try to like moderate like my use of it.
Sure.
Because like I think that it'll it'll influence you and like necessarily like make you feel like certain type of ways, like, you know, from a negative perspective, like just judgmental criticism wise. And then like, I like, you know, just like sometimes I want to sit like, you know, to have my own thoughts, not that like, you know, the internet is telling me this,
totally,
like, you know, not to like this, or like, you know, how do I feel about it personally? Because I feel like, you know, sometimes that people's opinions will influence you not to like something or not to check something out.
Yeah.
And like, you know, now we have this whole thing too with AI and like, you know, being a writer, how does like AI, like, what are your thoughts about it? Do you use it or?
Yeah, man, it's funny because I was just working on a project for a long time that was about AI. And I actually started working on it before ChatGPT. And I can't really speak about it specifically, but I went through the process of saying like I would never use AI, I would never think about it. Then as I realized like, okay, let me see what it's talking about. And so like I do use ChatGPT sometimes just as like, I think sometimes, you know this as a writer, man, to be in isolation that long with your own thoughts, it kind of gives you like a little assistant to talk back to you.
Right.
Even if I don't, and sometimes I'll tell it, that was a bad idea. I don't value its opinion necessarily, but I like how it helps me organize my thoughts. Like sometimes I'll even just sort of free associate right into ChatGPT. And then I'll be like, you know, put this in some sort of structure for me so I can read it back. And a lot of times I do that just as a sort of exercise to see, you know, and I keep very detailed journals and like dream journals and stuff. And I've actually put my journals into ChatGPT and then I'll ask it questions about myself to see if there are patterns in my diary and journals that it can tell me that I'm not seeing. So yeah, I use it a little bit, but I don't necessarily ask it to like write stories, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Like I feel like I see like the value of using it.
Yeah.
Like I like to use it. Like I use Perplexity. I use it a lot, like, you know, just for like
what's Perplexity?
It's similar to
like same thing. Okay, cool.
But like
cool.
It's pretty cool. Like, you know, it searches like the whole internet. Like it'll give you an answer, like, you know, like within minutes.
Yeah.
Like if you have like the first time I used it was like I was in traffic and like we were like on like the 405 and we were like, why is there so much traffic right now? And it told us like, oh, because there was an accident, like, you know, like 3 exits ahead, like but it found that on the internet, like you know, so like I use it for like stuff like that, like, you know, to kind of get like more insight, or like even like before the interview, that's how like I found out, like, you know, like you were all staying, like I was like, I was like, that's interesting, like because it's like, you know, because even like your podcast, I didn't see you like, that's not something you like advertise or like talk about, or like it's not something that easily is Googleable. Like
yeah, man. I mean, it's something we kind of just have gotten up and running. It's called Notes with Jack. And so the director that directed Safe Space is a guy named Jack O'Brien.
Yeah, Lifetime Tony Award winner.
Oh, yeah, Lifetime Tony. I should probably lead with that, right? Lifetime Tony Award winning Jack O'Brien. Or Lifetime Tony Award winner Jack O'Brien. Yeah, he's won multiple Tonys. He's like maybe the kind of most prolific oldest living theater director there is, you know? I mean, he's been directing theater for like over 50 years.
I was so impressed by like that podcast, and I feel like, you know, it's very valuable. I recommend anybody like who's acting like to check that out. Like I feel like you'll take something from that, and like, you know, I enjoy that because, like, you know, it's like he has so much expertise, and like, you know, talking about like, you know, his entry into the theater world. And I really enjoyed it. I was telling you before the interview started about like, you know, how I kind of took things away from it, like, you know, that resonated with me. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was just like him saying, like, you know, when he started off, it was like how he was working with like all these great actors and you know, people who had done theater, and like he wasn't getting paid, you know. And I think I was like, wow, I was like, you know, I was like, that's passion, because I feel like a lot of times in entertainment, everybody like wants to get paid. Like, you know, I feel like nobody comes into entertainment with the idea of like working for free or like,
no, I mean, listen, man, it's amazing how much work I think you look back realizing you did for free. For me, at least, even me, right? So it's like, you know, even after something like high, like the past few years, even when I was doing stuff where I was paid, you end up doing a lot for free anyway, right? And I think like passion is what pushes you through that blockade, because it is a real thing where people are like, okay, well, I have to figure out like, can I do this and survive, right? And that's a real thing that people have to debate. But I think like with someone like Jack as an example, he's so passionate about the theater. Now, would he have done all this his whole life for free? No, right? He was lucky enough to like get to a position where he could start to get paid for it. But, you know, it's like he's actually acting for his first time on a TV show right now. He's acting in the new season of The Comeback. At 86, he was cast, right?
That's amazing.
It's crazy, right? But he makes this joke because he's like, you know, they're paying me TV money now. He's a regional theater guy for like 30 years. Like there's no money in regional theater. And so even for him, you know, he wasn't making the types of money that you know, people like Steven Spielberg make and stuff like that, right? But so he really loved it. And I wasn't, you know, I wrote a play, but I wasn't like a theater guy growing up. I'm not like this guy that's been sort of dyed in the wool at the theater. And when I met Jack, I'm like, man, this guy loves theater more than I love anything. You know what I mean? And so I love, you know, like I don't really like musicals. You know, don't tell Jack. But like, no, I've told him. But but he's like one of the biggest musical directors there is. And when he talks about it, he makes me want to like Hairspray. You know what I mean? He's like, I start listening to him talk and I'm like, maybe Hairspray is pretty good, you know? No, I mean, it is great. But I say that to say that his passion, which carried him through those years where he wasn't getting his paid, you know, that same passion is why I wanted to start this podcast with him, because I thought like, wouldn't it be funny if these guys 50 some years apart sit around and talk about theater and his life. And you pointed this out earlier, man, when I got here and you were talking about it, which I'm so grateful you took the time to listen to it. But I believe that we have to find a way to get the wisdom of these people that are older and translate it to a younger generation. And it doesn't mean that like they're right. Like this is what I always kind of go back and forth with Jack about. We were talking about Shakespeare on a recent episode. And I was like, and he, you know, he's always upset because no one knows Shakespeare anymore. You know, like so many young actors coming up aren't well versed in Shakespeare. And I always tell him, what's most important is reaching young people, right? It's like, don't tell them, don't hit them with a Othello over the head and be like, you have to love Shakespeare. It's more like, why should they love Shakespeare? Why does Shakespeare matter now? And how do you make it accessible to people? And so I don't know. I feel like that with all of his wisdom. And that's what the podcast is about. It's like, how can we take what he knows at 86 and a lifetime of theater and translate it to younger people? So maybe it helps them with theater. Maybe it helps them, you know, acting for film and TV. Maybe it just helps them, you know, in life.
No, I feel like, you know, that's great. Like I feel, I recommend my people like to check that out. Notes with Jack. I'm so impressed. And I feel like, you know, that is so unique because you don't really, I feel like in our society, like we don't really value the voices of older people.
Yeah.
Like after like a certain point, it's kind of like go away. Like we honor people, like, you know, give them awards and stuff. And I feel though the internet has made it though, like you can take like, you know, wisdom and like, you know, kind of like soak up and like learn something.
Yeah.
And I love Shakespeare. And it wasn't something like, you know, like I didn't grow up like, you know, being into theater. I just like, you know, had this idea, like I wanted to do TV and film, but like, you know, then I was like studying in acting class and, you know, they were like, well, like you kind of have to like learn theater.
Yeah.
And I was like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you know, it's like you kind of resist that. I just want to do TV and film.
Yeah.
And like, but then it was like, I actually started like, you know, enjoying like theater, like, you know, by reading it and like, you know, kind of like getting the idea, like, and it's not something like I would have known that I enjoyed or like loved. It's like, I feel like being exposed to those things is like, it really helps. So I think like exposure plays a big part because like, especially like, you know, when I grew up, like nobody ever, I've heard of Shakespeare maybe like on TV or
right,
you know,
right. Yeah.
it's not something that was like taught in my school or
Yeah.
you know, where people were like, you know, like
Yeah.
yeah, like we need to like, you know, do a play like in Shakespeare. Or,
Did you have like a good teacher? Like I'm always curious about this. Did you have like what was your way into it? You had like a teacher, a professor, like that was like, man, you should check this out, and they help you understand it? Like how did that work?
So I've been acting for a while, but like I finally got a chance to take formal acting classes. I went to the New York Film Academy here
Amazing.
in Burbank. And so like the very first teacher I had, like it was this gentleman and he was like, he's a working director. He like kind of like worked on some like films and stuff like that. But he was saying like, you know, to be like a serious actor, you have to study theater. And so he gave us like theater monologues.
Yeah.
And the first monologue he assigned me, what was the monologue he assigned me? So he assigned my friend. I remember he assigned him like the 6 Degrees of Separation monologue. He assigned me a monologue from Boy's Life, which was a play won like a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
But like I did the monologue and like I read the play. It was kind of like, you know, it was like written in the 80s. So like it was kind of like about like, you know, like the HIV crisis and like being like middle age and dating and stuff. So like at the time and stuff and everything, it wasn't like something that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And then like my friend, he was really upset because he was like, he didn't want to do the monologue that he had signed him because the character was gay. And like, you know, he felt like, you know, that it was kind of like, you know, he was like, he's like, he just didn't get it. Like, you know, and I was like, oh, but like, you know, like Will Smith did that role. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's kind of cool. Like, you know, I was like, when I learned that monologue too, like read the play just because I thought it was like a cool play. And like, you know, and I just got into like, you know, this period, like when they had like Samuel French on Sunset. So I would go to Samuel French and I would just like look for plays. Like kind of like to read, like, you know, to do monologues. And, and after a while, like the way like NIFA was though, like you get a lot of scene work. And so like people would kind of like do schedule scenes, but you wouldn't really do them. Cause like people, it's so much fun stuff to do here in LA. People don't really want to go to acting class. They're like at the beach or whatever. So like, it's like a lot of like, you've showed up to class, like they're not here today. Or like everybody wants to film. Like, you know, a lot of people like, you know, they're foreign students. So they just come here with the idea of like, you know, they want to go and like, you know, shoot like as many short films, hoping like, you know, that they could get something like on their reel, at least them being on television or something. So like, it like in that aspect you weren't really getting a lot of time, but like I'll just do a monologue. I'll just practice. So I'm like practicing all these different monologues. And we did it a Shakespeare class, like where we like practiced Shakespeare, and it was like they had like he was, you know, like a theater director, and he assigned us like, you know, Shakespeare monologues. And like I like, you know, learned a Othello monologue and then like just reading different Shakespeare. So like, but that got me interested in theater, at least like where it was like, you know, something I had no interest in before, like, or like I wouldn't even have really been open to it. Like I was more so like, I just want to kind of do TV or film. But like it opened my world and my mindset up and like, you know, just like things and stuff that I wouldn't have read. And like, you know, gave me different thoughts and like, you know, like Indian in Once the Bronx. That's like like by Israel Horowitz. It's like one of my favorite plays. And even like, you know, plays like Mike O'Malley, like, you know, who did Guts. Like he wrote a play, you know, 3 Years from 30, which is an amazing play. And I just like, I fell in love, like, you know, with the idea of like theater. And like after that, then I went to Lee Strasberg and then like I went to Harvard Extension for a little bit. But
that's cool, man.
Like I just like kind of like, I was like, theater's like cool. Like,
dude, I'll have to make sure Jack hears this because he'll love that, what you're saying about how like you're introduced to Shakespeare and something because he always says like, you know, his quote is like, there's all of literature and then there's King Lear. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, Shakespeare is everything, you know? And it's like that's such an interesting, I don't know, man. It's cool because I was the same way. I didn't really grow up. I mean, like I said, I didn't really grow up around the theater. And then actually that attorney who I talked about earlier, who kind of got me into writing, he was the first person he would take me to like real plays for the first time. You know, I've been to like high school stuff and I was actually I was in a play my senior year in high school acting, but like I just did it because I made a bet with my buddy. You know what I mean? But like then when I got to New York and, you know, one thing after another. And this attorney sort of, we would go because he represented a lot of playwrights. There's a play, I always tell people, a play called Disgraced by a writer named Ayad Akhtar. And I saw that before it went to Broadway. It was off Broadway at Lincoln Center. And I remember for the first time, you know, I don't remember if it was like the first real time I felt this way, but it's the first time I remember thinking this way, where I saw it and I was like, holy cow, like you can do that in theater,
Yeah.
you know? And it was about this guy, you know, this Arab American who was in this law firm, and it was sort of like a lot of post 9/11 type judgment stuff. And anyways, it was just so well done, and it just felt like a firecracker the whole time. And I don't know, I'm just kind of saying like I had a similar experience in a different way where like I got to understand sort of, oh wow, theater speaks to me, and that like inspired me to write Safe Space.
Yeah, that's incredible. And like I didn't think like, you know, there would be something like I would be interested in. I feel like, you know, almost like kind of ignorant in a way, like my thought of like, you know, what theater was. And like,
Totally.
you know, I really see like, you know, like how though it helped me like grow and like, you know, have like more of an open mind and like more understanding. And I think it's really a good thing. Like I feel like I wish like, you know, like I would have had like more of an arts emphasis, like when I was younger. Like I remember there were people who were like into arts like around me and stuff like, you know, but like I always thought like, and I tried like drama club, like when I was early, and like I enjoyed like the people who were in drama club, but like it wasn't like something that, you know, like stuck with me. And like it didn't seem very practical and like just like the world. And like, I don't know, like, yeah. So it's like, sure. But like, you know, when I grew up, like, you know, and like actually like I do see like, you know, like where Shakespeare and the lessons kind of like that you learn in it is it's really great. And I feel like that it's something like, you know, that I think like more people would love it if they gave it a chance.
Totally.
Yeah, like, you know, even like the classics like Chekhov too, like, you know, it's like it's a lot to take like out of it, like, you know, like just as far as like I don't know who said it, but like it's like growth as a artist and a human being like are synonymous, and like I really do believe that. And I think like actually like reading those works, like it makes you a better person.
Yeah,
and it's just like I've seen like, you know, different like where they do like they have these prison programs, and you see like, you know, these hardcore gang members, and like they start getting introduction into theater, and it changes and transforms them. So like I think it's something there. Yeah,
it's so cool, man. I have a lot of far out there ideas about things, and one of my far out ideas is I think plays that or stories that have a resonance for a long time. You know, like I believe like a lot in cultural evolution, and by that I mean if stuff stays around for a while, it's valuable in one way or another. You know what I mean? It's like nothing, even if you don't think it's great, nothing hangs around for hundreds of years unless it's important to the human condition. And I think about with stories, like they help map the patterns of reality. You know, it's like we think about, you know, we all like talk about, because sometimes I think like now part of the reason as many people aren't, like people always say like social media hurt Hollywood and all, you know, attention spans and all this kind of stuff. I think part of it is too, we don't need stories as much because we spend so much time talking about it. Like everyone has a therapist now. Like everyone talks about working on themselves and their feelings. And sometimes I think that stories used to serve that function because they're like a mirror that help us understand our patterns. And now it's like we sit down with our friend and we're like, oh, you know, I'm attachment avoidant or whatever these things are. And we're like, well, it used to be you'd see a Chekhov play and you'd be like, oh, that's crazy because watching this play helped me understand I go on that journey. You know what I mean? Like you know, you watch, I don't know, we were talking about Henry IV the other day on the podcast. It's like you watch Henry IV and you're like, oh, I was Prince Hal living like I literally was. I like hung out in the bars too much. I drank too much. I hang out with the wrong people. One day I was like tapped on the shoulder, like I got to grow up. And so like I went on that journey that Prince Hal goes on in Henry IV. And so now I can look at that play from Shakespeare and be like, oh, not only am I not alone in that, you know what I mean? Like not only am I not, but it helps me see myself clearly as like, oh, I see his arc. I understand my arc. It helps me understand myself. And sometimes I wonder if because we're all sitting around on couches talking about our feelings now, do we not need stories as much? You know what I mean? Or like, I don't know, it sounds like to me though that like stories helped you the way they helped me, which is like better understand yourself.
Yeah, I feel like we still need them. I think there's important, but the problem I would say like is the commercialization and like a lot of times like, you know, the idea of like commercializing and making money over like having any truth that actually helps people and like the authenticity, like, you know, where it's like you don't see like, you know, like these indie films like getting made as much. And like, you know, now because of streaming and stuff, everything like, you know, so I feel like, you know, the idea of profit kind of hurts real art sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think it's definitely made things more difficult And my hope is maybe that makes us have to get sharper. You know what I mean? We got to get, like, all you can do is get better. You know, it's like, that's the hope, because but I don't know. It's tough.
So how did you end up like writing screenplays? Like from like did that kind of like, the success of like the play, like, like open the door for like, to be able to write film?
Honestly, man, so Safe Space, it all really happened very quickly, where I had written this play and we had like one reading. And the guy, I think I mentioned him, he's an agent at CAA named Kevin Lynn. He had come to see my one-person show, and he had liked it and was like, he was an acting agent. And he was like, I'd like to kind of help you as an actor. And I remember telling him, honestly, it was because, I don't tell this story a lot, but there was a guy in the audience at one of the performances of my one-person show that was the guy I looked up to. He was like this iconic one-person guy from the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And he was there. And I heard after the show, he didn't really dig it that much. Like it's like we talked about with like, how criticism can hurt you.
Yeah.
When I got that, it felt like almost like a rejection from like God. You know what I mean? I was like, dang, God doesn't think God doesn't think I'm any good, but man, I regret it every day of my life. I wish I'd have kept doing that one-person show, because what I did was I stopped. And when this agent asked me like, I would like to help you as like help you with some auditions, like that kind of thing, I was like, honestly, man, I'm not sure I want to be an actor. Like, I think I might just be a writer. And a big reason was because of that guy's response to the show. So maybe not in music, but definitely in that, I definitely did not deal as well as I'd liked with that criticism.
No, I get that. Like, I feel like a lot of times people may not even like feel like how like their words affect you. And like sometimes like, man, it's like, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am.
Yeah.
Or like,
right. It's like, I think what I've learned, because I hate giving other people power over me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like, instead of being like, hey man, watch your words, I got to be like, you know what? His opinion means about as much as my little nephew's. You know what I mean? It's like one person's opinion counts for one person. I don't care if you're the greatest, I don't care if you're Denzel Washington or you're my nephew. It's like your opinion is your opinion.
And then also too, like you would probably need like a deeper like understanding to like conversation, because he could have just like thought like, that he didn't like it, but it could be like for a number of
he didn't like my shoes.
Or just like, like he felt like, like, oh, like, he's comparing it to like how he would have did it. Or like, like I think like a lot of that, like, from an artistic perspective, like, maybe like, some great hip hop artist saying like they don't like my song necessarily, even if it has like some commercial success, then, like
totally, man. Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, look, man, I love David Bowie, right?
Yeah.
I love him. I mean, I love his music, but I really love what he stands for in so many different ways in his life, right?
I saw David Bowie one day, like on Sunset. It was so random, man.
Really?
Like a long time ago. Like,
you got to tell me the story now, man.
No, I was just like, I was like on Sunset one day, and like I just saw David Bowie, like, you know what I mean, and stuff. Like I was like, oh wow, like, you know what I'm saying?
You're just out here walking down Sunset.
I was like over. I remember I was over by the actor studio.
Wow.
I went to go like audition to be in the actor studio, like for the MFA program, not the actor studio, but like they have the MFA program at Pace University. I got accepted and stuff and everything, but that day I saw David Bowie. I was like, this is wow, like, but like, like
that's crazy, man. Yeah, I love, like I said, he's become such a symbol in my life for a lot of different reasons. And one thing I love about him so much is like, he was relentlessly doing what he felt was the thing he was supposed to do. And it didn't matter if you liked it or you loved it or whatever. And I think now we look back on an artist like him and we love him not just because he wrote Ziggy Stardust, right? Which is a cool song and people like it. We love him because we saw him be like radically authentic at all times. Like I didn't like the whole a lot of the stuff he did, I don't look at it and be like, oh, that was dope. But I look at his life and like what he did as a human and I'm like, man, like we should all be so lucky. Like we should all aspire to things in whatever you do, right? To be like as authentic, we get back to authenticity, as authentic as he was in living his life, And so I say that to say that, to bring it full circle, the criticism, I think what's so important is if you believe, like with your music, right? If you believe in what you're putting out there, it's great if people say good job and it hurts a little if they say I didn't feel it, but more than anything, you got to know that like, no, I'm putting it out. This is me. And I feel like that was Bowie. And the last thing I'll say about Bowie, he wasn't always like that, man. Like he was trying to get on for like a decade. A lot of people don't know that about David Bowie. He was trying all these different things. He was like following trends, all this kind of stuff. And then it seems like something just shifted at a certain point where he realized like, I'm going to have to be me or die trying. And when he did that, rocket ship, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's been such a lesson for me too, is to see his trajectory in that way.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, we've been doing some tangents. You asked me about screenplays.
Yeah, but like, basically like, safe space opening the door for you to be able to write
so safe space was optioned, which means like basically a movie studio or producer will option something, basically like give you a little bit of money in order to potentially produce it as a screenplay. And so they like did that and they paid me to write the screenplay. And when that happened, it was like a pretty big, like a lot of people in Hollywood got to read the play and they really liked it. And so suddenly I had a lot of opportunity to write screenplays. And the joke I always make is like, I had sold 2 screenplays and set up a TV show before I ever had final draft to write it. That's how crazy Hollywood is, because they all thought I was they're like, you wrote this play. And again, I try to be really honest about it, man. Like, it wasn't a great play. It was great ideas. But in Hollywood, everyone's afraid of missing out on the next big thing.
Yeah.
So like, you can kind of trick people and you're just like, you write this thing and people are like, oh man, what else do you have? And I'm like, funny you should ask. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even have final draft. And so I'm like, so the joke I always make is like, I basically, you said you went to New York Film Academy, like to study acting. I basically went to film school or screenwriting school at Sony Pictures because they were paying me to learn a lot of hard lessons about writing screenplays. And so like I wrote Safe Space, which no one liked. I wrote a movie about.
It has some good reviews though. Like,
well, not the play. I'm sorry, the screenplay.
But
the screenplay didn't really work. I just mean like,
Okay,
I got like all these notes from the studio. Like, it just wasn't. A director never attached. It
didn't necessarily translate to like a film.
No, and I wrote a screenplay, biopic about Charlie Chaplin making a movie called The Great Dictator. I worked with Sacha Baron Cohen a little bit on that, but like it never got made.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I wrote the book I told you about at the beginning, the manuscript about my time in like a sort of fictional account of my time in the modeling world. That was called Mannequin Life. I developed that for television with Kerry Washington and ABC Signature and Hulu, and like that never got off the ground. Oh, wow. Like it's like, and then I wrote a movie called that we're still trying to put together now for Jonathan Majors and Mark Forrester. That never got off the ground. I wrote a movie for Dakota Johnson at Sony. That never got off the ground. And I wrote a movie for a production company called 21 Laps, which is a big, they make Stranger Things and stuff, with a director named Kyle Patrick Alvarez. That never got off the ground. So I tell people that to say, I wrote a long time before Highest to Lowest.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about like 3 drafts of every screenplay I just named. I'm writing 3 or 4 drafts.
Wow, yeah.
And it's like, so I was lucky because I got paid to get progressively better.
Yeah.
But I almost burnt myself out, where like I kept missing so many times with people in the industry. It's like, we don't want him to write it. Like, he can't get it there. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a guy that wrote a play about people arguing that people liked, and suddenly I was a screenwriter.
That's so interesting. Like, but I feel like that's great. Like, because like now, like I feel like Highest to Lowest, man, like I was so impressed by that movie. And like, I mean, obviously it has like a amazing actor like Denzel Washington, who's like one of the best actors, and then one of the best directors attached to it. But like, that had to be like a lot of satisfaction, like, just to have like your words being said, like, on the screen by like one of the greatest actors. And then A$AP Rocky did an amazing job. Like, how
thanks, man.
Exciting was that? Like,
Yeah, it was cool, man. I mean, but even now, the process, a lot of people, man, I mean, one thing, for your listeners and people watching, like, Hollywood is such a misconception, because it's such a, we all get to watch the movie and we have certain ideas, and we all get to watch the PR for the movies, and we have certain ideas about like what goes on. But man, it's just like, as a writer, it's just you sitting in a room by yourself for hours and hours and hours and hours, right? And so like, and I'm saying that to say that like, man, Highest to Lowest, I don't know if you know the story behind it, but it had been in development for 30. Oh yeah, you were at the screening, so you heard Jason talk about my buddy, the producer of Highest to Lowest, Jason Berman. It'd been developed for 30 years. And Jason and I had developed a friendship based off the movie I told you I wrote called The Black Cyclone. He actually was the financier on that movie. So I'd worked with him before, and we worked on some other things. And he came to me and he was like, are you an Akira Kurosawa fan? And I was like, I don't know a Kirk or Sauer really. You know, I'd heard his name, but he's like, well, he wrote a movie called he had a movie called High and Low. He's like, Denzel wants to play the role in the remake. If you have an idea for it, I'd love to talk to you about being the writer on it. So I went and I read about it. And the story, if people don't know, High and Low is about a businessman in Japan in the 60s, like right after kind of capitalism takes hold in Japan. And it's about this sort of like mid-tier, middle-aged businessman and his driver. And then like in the movie Highest to Lowest that we have, it's about a kidnapping and all this kind of stuff. But anyways, when I read it was about a guy and his driver, I thought back to my days in the music industry. And I actually had known a really prolific hip hop personality, him and his driver. And so I got to know his driver pretty well. And I said, wait a minute, what if we set this in the music business, right? So that's actually where the whole idea came from. Mm-hmm. So then I went off, man, and I just like wrote this thing, not knowing what was going to happen with it, right? And I had to do, you know, I did make a lot of structural changes and this kind of stuff. And then we sent it to Denzel, and like overnight, I get a phone call. It's like, hey, Denzel wants to do it, and Spike Lee is going to direct it. Now I love He Got Game. I mean, I grew up playing basketball. Right. I wanted to be Jesus Shuttlesworth. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like when I hear this, it's amazing news, you know? But then it's like, okay, and you know, Spike does a lot of work on scripts as well. So after that, I sort of think my job here is done, you know? And they take it, and then the writer's strike happened. And so like, it's just like a long gap where I don't hear anything, you know? So it is, to answer your question, it's like, it is satisfying. And then it's also weird because it's like, man, it feels so far away. Mm. And then right before they went into production, I got another call, which was like, hey, they want you to come back in and do work because, you know, Spike Lee had done some work on the script because as he does on all his scripts. Right. And so I think when people see the movie, they'll see like, it sounds like a Spike Lee movie. And, you know, a lot of this, you know, changes he made from my original draft, but they asked me to come in and like do some work blending his changes into the original draft that I had, you know what I mean? So that's why I'm the sole credited writer, because like I kind of came in and like made a marriage out of like what I had and what he had done and wanted to incorporate and like what Denzel wanted to incorporate. And so I say all that to say like, it was very rewarding. It was also like such a lesson in what's your role in the process. Right. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we have this idea, like I always tell people as a writer, you're more of a problem solver. You know, if you want to be an artist, like go write a play, you're in control. You want to be a screenwriter, get ready to just be you're like a plumber. Like I got to fix the toilet. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like Spike Lee says he wants this to happen. And Denzel says he doesn't like that line of dialogue. Like I tell people this story that there was a part in my draft that Denzel didn't want that was at the beginning. And I remember talking to him for so long about like, you know, we got into a bit of an argument about it. And he as an actor was looking at it. Basically, it was this moment where his character was walking into the gym near the beginning of the film, since you've seen it, and he was going to see briefly the kidnapper getting a parking ticket written. Because we wanted to establish that the kidnapper knew which one was his kid. You know what I mean? Like, and that was, you know, we didn't need to do it because of social media, but there was another reason why we needed to have the police know his identity, sort of set up by a parking ticket. Anyways, Denzel was like, my character would never do that. And I remember being like, look, man, like if we don't have this moment in the movie, a lot of the second half of the movie is going to fall apart. And he was like, well, my character would never do that. And if my character would not look over there or wouldn't like clock someone like that, I'm not going to do it in the movie. And it taught me a real lesson about working with actors, which is like, you know this as an actor, you work from moment to moment, right? Mm-hmm. You're not looking at the whole story all at one time necessarily. Right. You're thinking about how do I be most truthful in the moment? As the writer, I'm thinking, if we lose this moment, all of this at the back of the movie falls apart, right? So it's like a lesson in like blending that. So yeah, was it rewarding? It was rewarding. It was also a lot of lessons.
Yeah, definitely. And you did a great job, like, you know, with that, like, because like I from what you described, I see like other moments though, like they kind of like allude to that and like, you know, make that clear.
Thanks, man.
In the movie, like, you know, but I enjoyed that, man. People check out Highest to Lowest, man. Yeah. Like, you know, what's next for you?
There's a couple things, man. I don't think I can't really speak in specifics, but a movie I've written, I'm really excited about. Okay. We're out to directors now with it, and hopefully we're also out to actresses. And so hopefully we'll get a package together here pretty soon and be able to set that up. And then, I'm thinking about possibly, directing the next thing I do. Nice. It wouldn't be this one, but it would be the next one after that. Because I think one thing I learned in Highest to Lowest through that process was like the way, you know, if you want to be in control of your story, you have to be a director in the movie business, you know? And that's something that I think I was grateful to go through the process of Highest to Lowest, because I got to watch one of the all-time greats work. I got to see like how he treated being a director. I got to be around all these amazing, talented people. And so me moving forward, I'm like, oh, okay, this has been a great lesson in a lot of different departments. How can I use this moving forward? And one of the things I came up with was like, maybe I'd like to direct and take a shot at that. So that's one thing I'm thinking about as well.
Definitely, man. Alan, I really appreciate you for coming on, and you know, like I definitely look forward to following your career, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, anytime.
Absolutely.